Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, today I want to talk about the creation of the Grand Line. Guys, the weather within the Grand Line is insane. Not just bizarre because One Piece is bizarre, it's bizarre within the world of One Piece. Separated from the other seas, the rest of the world, by the Calm Belt, a stretch of sea that does not produce winds or currents of any kind ever. It's even suggested that storms that attempt to cross it literally die. Storms can't exist there. But outside of the Calm Belt, every island has a unique climate, or most islands do, totally independent of what the weather might be on the islands neighboring it. In the Grand Line, there isn't 4 seasons. There are 16, at least, ranging from summer islands, summer, to a winter islands, winter, and a few islands even more absurd than that, like Enies Lobby, which exists in permanent daylight. In between these islands, the weather is totally unpredictable. One second it's hot, the next there is a blizzard, now it's raining candy. The only way to navigate at sea is by using a log pose, which targets each island's unique magnetic field. Direction makes no sense. If you don't follow your log pose at all times, all of a sudden you're going a totally different direction, even without the sea seemingly pushing you or the currents changing at all. And in the New World, it's even more unreliable, essentially needing 3 log poses in one to reliably travel. So I think that this is fairly apparent, most people get this. The weather on the Grand Line is bizarre, it's insane. So I don't think that this is a controversial statement. The Grand Line, it did not always exist. It is unnatural, not created by nature, and that's the reason why the Grand Line is totally different from the rest of the planet. I don't think that there's anything I can say or find that can definitively prove this. Sure, Laboon bashes his head against the red line like it's in his way and it shouldn't be there. Not definitive proof that the world of One Piece has been altered. Sure, all of this makes no sense, but I guess that you could believe in anime logic. Yeah, Nami does silly, unrealistic things with weather. Even still, being an expert on silly, unrealistic weather, the Grand Line is totally inexplicable to her as well. I suppose you either believe or you don't, but this theory is going to assume that the Grand Line did not always exist, it was created, because that is what I believe. I think that Oda is a genius, and I think that Oda, especially regarding something core to the world of One Piece, he'll have an answer for us at some point in time. These things won't just exist. He'll have a reason for their existence that works within the rules that he has already established. It will be justified, and the story is slowly cultivating these reveals, the truths of the world. If you already don't buy this, you probably won't like this theory that much, but maybe I could persuade you as we go forward. At least with cool factor. But if you assume this to be true, the Grand Line was created, you end up with really 2 big questions. The question of why, who altered it, why? And the question of how was the weather altered? We'll get to both of these questions soon, so let's start with the how. Over the course of many years, there has been all sorts of theories, one of the more popular being Uranus, the ancient weapon. People speculate about, the existence of some kind of weather technology, maybe even a devil fruit. A lot of folk believe that Monkey D. Dragon has the storm Paramecia, and if he just wanted to stick with what we know, Kaido with the Dragon Devil Fruit can also summon storms and affect the weather. These are all common theories for how the weather in the Grand Line could have been changed. So the idea I want to discuss today, that I haven't really specifically talked about before, is that the Grand Line was awakened. The crazy weather of the Grand Line is due to powerful Devil Fruit awakenings. And as you dig deep, some of the possibilities are just really cool. One Piece does not ass-pull powers. If you think that, you're wrong. And if you bring up sugar, I will, without hesitation, end you on the spot. Permanent ban. Even as strange and fantastic and diverse as the world is and the powers within it, it probably operates based on rules that must be followed. But it stands to reason that if the world or the Grand Line is unnatural, the way it was changed relates to the supernatural aspects probably already built into One Piece. And out of all of these, Devil Fruits seem the most likely because we've already seen the effect that they can have on the landscape and climate. Awakenings are a relatively new concept in One Piece, at least only recently has it been highlighted and emphasized. And introduced as late as it was, I'd wager Oda has big plans for it in the story sometime very soon. not just in terms of fights and combat techniques, but to maybe explain the One Piece world itself. So far we have 2 canon confirmed awakening types, the awakening zone jailers of Impel Down being the first. We're gonna ignore this. But essentially it appears awakened zones simply become more powerful in every conceivable physical way. The second type of awakening is much more interesting. Doflamingo tells us, listen up, Devil Fruit abilities have a whole other stage to them. It's called awakening. Very rarely an ability will awaken and begin to affect things other than the user's own body. Affect things other than the user's own body. And Doflamingo transformed the non-living world around him into string. The world became made of string. Katakuri also demonstrated a similar ability, transforming the world into mochi. I think obviously enough, there are still yet to be revealed types of awakenings because I don't imagine every fruit, even Paramecia's, are going to awaken in the same way. For instance, in non-canon movies that Oda oversaw or had influence in, Douglas Bullet and Gil Tesoro's version of awakening was not the same as Katakuri and Doflamingo. Instead of producing substances, both could control substances, so their awakenings simply made this power stronger, controlling more, and controlling better, basically. Whether this is going to be canon or not in the future, we'll find out. But because of these examples, for the most part, I ignore fruits like Pika's fruit. He doesn't produce rock, he controls it, so awakening in my mind would act like Gil Tesoro. And that may very well have been the fruit which facilitated the creation of the Red Line, if the Red Line was created. It's possible. But the fact that the world can be changed by devil fruits intrigues me. Using these powers, you could potentially create the Grand Line. As we see it now, it really just depends on whether or not awakenings which transform the world are permanent, and I think that they are. Many people, myself included, believe Akainu and Aokiji are unconfirmed, awakened Logia Devil Fruit users. From a story standpoint, that just makes sense. From a purely logical standpoint, I imagine the majority of the strongest characters in the series going forward that the heroes are going to have to fight or will fight with will be awakened. For Akainu and Aokiji on an absurd scale. And it seems permanent. I imagine 100, 800, 1,000 years into the future, Punk Hazard will still be as we see it now. The remnants of an awakened Logia battlefield. Akainu did not just burn Punk Hazard, he fundamentally changed what the island is. So what devil fruit powers out there could change the world so that we could create the Grand Line as it is today? We're going to start off with something more speculative but also very interesting, and we'll get into more ideas that I think are consumable to everybody. I think that the calm belts could have been created using the calm fruit we saw in the possession of Corazon, or a superior version of this devil fruit which has yet to be revealed. This is an interesting example because it's not analogous with other fruits that could be considered or speculated to be awakened. This fruit does not manipulate a substance that already exists, like Pika's fruit, like Gil Tesoro. It's also not a typical production fruit, although you are producing something, or you're changing the laws, the rules. It's different. How would the bubble around themselves, and within the bubble no sound escapes? The bubble, nobody can hear what you're doing. You could, I guess, speculate an awakening would simply make the devil fruit stronger. For instance, a larger bubble, which I guess could make you wonder if Trafalgar Law in his Opi Opi no Mi is already awakening. If that's the extent of awakening for these types of area of effect bubble creating devil fruits. But I find it much more interesting to apply this fruit's design in a more nuanced way. The fruit allows the user to affect things other than the user's body, permanently. Thus, the awakened calm fruit applies its nature to the world around it, hypothetically creating an island which makes no sound. Pretty fitting island for the Grand Line, I would say. If the Strat crew encountered an island like this, it would not feel out of place. This devil fruit taken to the furthest reaches of hypothetics and headcanon, blocking all different kinds of inorganic vibrations, waves that enter the affected area. The land does not transmit vibrations of any kind, the pure form of calmness. No sea waves, no currents, no breeze, no quakes. The calm belt. But important caveat here. This effect not applied to forces generated by organic mechanics. We'll explain this again later, but you can still paddle yourself, but the world won't do it on its own because its nature has been transformed by the devil fruit. The sea and the sky and the clouds and the weather won't produce any waves on its own. I'm just going to tell you right now, though, if this devil fruit actually exists, if this is the full potential of the calm fruit or a superior version of the calm fruit, good lord, this devil fruit would be so powerful. Totally broken. But I digress, you get the point. As I said, the calm fruit works here if you stretch it, using the basic concepts of it and apply it. It works better if you imagine a superior version of this fruit that includes more than just sound waves. For me, that's certainly not impossible, as there have been many examples over the years of fruits Oda has designed essentially the same as other fruits, but better. The Kilo fruit and the Ton fruit come to mind, and Oda has provided examples of this in an SBS before. So how do we explain the wide range of characteristics of islands on the Grand Line? Winter islands created by the awakening of the Chili fruit, currently in the possession of Aokiji. A lot of people think Akainu is his direct opposite, but really that's probably the heat fruit possessed by Oven. Or a Logia, pure heat fruit, which has yet to be revealed or introduced in the story. Also possibly responsible for Summer Island's climates. Both of these fruits produce a substance, even if it's not tangible, and should fall into the same or similar archetype as Doflamingo and Katakuri. Raijin Island, a dangerous island in the Grand Line which constantly produces lightning. Maybe the product of the awakening of the Gorogoro no Mi, Logia, Enel's fruit. If there was a magma island that existed somewhere, Kainu's fruit. If there was a windy island, the wind Logia or Paramecia. If there was a stormy island, if there was an island in constant daylight like Enies Lobby, the Pika no Mi, the light Logia owned by Kizaru. Low-key, I think that's the only way that I have to explain Enies Lobby, because that's baffling. Maybe an island that lives in perpetual darkness also exists. The awakening of Blackbeard's darkness fruit. All of this is really not that crazy to me, because Oda has literally just introduced Whole Cake Island and Totland. The devil fruits of the Big Mom Pirates have clearly and drastically changed the world around them, and we've seen this transformation because we saw Whole Cake Island in Big Mom's flashback, before it became a sweet paradise. Which fruits are actually responsible for this and how they are responsible for it is not really all that important because we actually see it. The land itself of Whole Cake Island has literally been transformed into various kinds of food and candy. This could have been the work of Stroizen, possibly with others' help. Is this change permanent or just constantly applied? I think that a little bit of both is true, and I don't think that every single one of Big Mom's children is awakened. Cacao Island in Chocolate Town, for instance, appears on an island that isn't completely transformed. It's most likely that they literally just bake the chocolates and the buildings and then put them up, they eat, they go bad, and they have to replace them. We know this. However, rivers of flowing juice in Whole Cake Island, they exist on several islands and in between islands. It flows out into the ocean, such that between many of the islands of Totland at night, the juice freezes. Maybe this was created by Smoothie, or Stroizen again. This does not seem like a momentary use of power to me. The nature of the river itself has changed, which seems more in line with awakening rather than just using a devil fruit power. Likewise, candy clouds exist, which precipitate cotton candy. Starlit Parosparrow awakened. Either way, Totland's existence and clear features of human devil fruit influence on the weather and nature of the islands could be foreshadowing of a reveal to come about the nature of the entire Grand Line, made by devil fruits. But so far, aside from the calm fruit example, we've gone with easy speculations, hot, cold, Logias, food-producing fruits. But what about some of the more nuanced and out there Paramecias? Is there any evidence of some crazier devil fruits potentially awakening and changing the nature of an island? I think so. Let's look at another cool hypothetical example. These two islands for me represent two sides of the same coin, Rusu-Kaena and Little Garden. If you guys don't remember, I made a video on this years ago. Rusu-Kaena, also called the Island of 48 Seasons, was an island in the Calm Belt near Amazon Lily. Luffy trained on this island during the 2-year time skip. Rather than having 4 seasons a year, as the name suggests, it has a season essentially every week, 48 seasons in a year. Because of this, the island is inhospitable except for the most evolved, strongest creatures. The nature of the island itself has promoted survival of the fittest, taken to its very extreme, making it the perfect island to train on. But how exactly did this island come to have 48 seasons? What ability or technology could possibly do that? I think that it may have been a time-related devil fruit. The weather, the nature of the island itself, time has been sped up. Where normally you would expect 4 seasons in a year, this island experiences 48. Guys, this is important to understand. These powers do not affect the people or the creatures of the island itself directly. Similar to the example of the awakened calm fruit. The nature of the area has changed, but it does not affect living creatures or maybe life itself, as you can create waves in various kinds inside the calm belt by paddling or talking or whatever. But the weather and the inorganic substances the sea itself produce none are incapable of producing waves. Time relative to you does not pass any faster for you on Rusukaina. Time related to the weather or the island itself, however, is different. I hope that you guys understand the difference. Luffy did not become exponentially older while training on Rusukaina. However, the land itself, the weather, did. It's constantly moving forward in time more rapidly than everything else around it. And I suppose this effect would also not be applied to like things that you are wearing, or Luffy's straw hat, for instance. Kind of like how when some people transform using their devil fruit abilities and become much larger or much smaller, their clothes sort of transform with them. It's a don't think about this too much moment. But anyway, in this you potentially also have a clue that the Grand Line was made. There used to be a civilization on Rusukaina. This is stated by Rayleigh, but they died off because of the insane weather. That in and of itself I think suggests the weather has not always been this way. Else the people here would have been adapted for it. They would have been used to it and be able to thrive within it. The weather killed them because the weather changed. But if you want an example of the opposite of this, look at Little Garden. Vivi tells us that the island appears trapped in time. She calls it a prehistoric island. How does this happen? I think that the island is slow to change because time for the island itself has been slowed in the same way. Maybe this could be the awakening of Foxy's devil fruit. Like, I would love to see that. Also for the other island, maybe Toki's devil fruit or something similar to that. But because the climate does not change, the things that live on the island have not changed either. It is the exact opposite of Rusukaina. Rusukaina promotes evolution and growth, survival of the fittest. Little Garden is stuck in time. I would love to go down the rabbit hole in depth, but I think that you guys get it. If you are Oda, how do you diversify the islands of the Grand Line? By using powers you have already introduced into the story. Awakenings make the most sense. Permanent changes to the nature of the places themselves. Similar to if these places ate devil fruits themselves and the effects are constantly on, but only affect themselves. At least directly. A place of quakes using Whitebeard's Guragura no Mi. A place of intense gravity using Fujitori's fruit. A place which potentially promotes growth or gigantism. Islands which could eternally float. Islands perpetually shrouded in mist like Mihawk's Island. Islands which may exist in an entirely different dimension. Perhaps within the Door fruit or within the mirror world. Any devil fruit you could conceive of could potentially influence islands we have yet to discover. An island that maybe exists within an illusion or is itself an illusion. Perhaps here we could discover the nature of Laugh-Tale, the most protected and difficult island to find. There's all sorts of examples that just inspire my imagination. Imagine Bartolomeo's barrier fruit, but applied, like an area that you literally cannot pass forever. Or maybe even an actual barrier island, an island composed made of barriers where things grew on top. Now that I say it, I almost want to see it. I imagine the comments for this video are going to be pretty fun to read. But we still have the second question. Why is the Grand Line this way? Why was it created? Here's an interesting fact and a power I decided not to mention up until now. We know every island in the Grand Line has a unique magnetic field which allows for log poses to function. As far as I am aware, every island can be discovered by log pose except for one, except Laugh-Tale. Log poses cannot find it, and yes, I am disregarding the eternal pose mentioned in the movie Stampede. Personally, if an island had a magnetic field, I would imagine that it would be discovered eventually by log pose and adventure upon the sea at the end of the Grand Line. Eventually you'd find it. So I think that is pretty obvious to everybody that I suspect that Kid's magnet fruit might have played a role in the creation of islands' unique magnetic fields and the usefulness of log poses, how they work, setting each island's magnetic waves individually. If you want more evidence that the Grand Line was potentially made, look at the exceptions. The island that can't be discovered, Laugh-Tale, does not have the same feature, or it was applied differently, probably on purpose. The common theory I typically hear once you've reached this question is, the world government created the Grand Line to separate the world into parts that it could individually suppress and conquer. This theory has some merit for sure, it could be true. But I believe that the Grand Line was instead created by ancient pirates. The Grand Line itself is an ancient pirate game that would attract the most daring, experienced, and competent pirates, and they place their treasure at the end of this journey, the One Piece. A lot of people disregard the Foxy arc as essentially non-canon to the story because, well, what does it add to the larger story? It just seems like filler to many people. But I think that people overlook the entire premise of the arc, the great idea it conveyed.
Afro Luffy.
Nah, I'm just kidding. The Davy Back fight. Davy Back fight suggests the nature of these ancient pirates, which are probably going to be important in the story going forward because of, at the very least, being sake, right? They are carefree, fun-loving adventurers of the sea. Will these kinds of people purposefully transform a sea into the ultimate pirate challenge? I think so. The Ancient Kingdom, which in many theories and many videos I've discussed, I believe was a kingdom of pirates from the Void Century. I think that they created this game using their strength and devil fruits they possessed at this time, transformed the Grand Line into a pirate obstacle course. The goal is to find the treasure at the end, the One Piece, by following the poneglyphs purposefully hidden across the various islands of the Grand Line. Poneglyphs they hid, and a treasure they placed. That is why Raftel cannot be found by log pose, because it was designed that way. The Calm Belt prevents cheating by sailing to the finish line and skipping the obstacle course. Poseidon of the past likely ordered the Sea Kings to guard the track's borders for much the same reason. If the Grand Line was indeed created, who would have been most suitable to do so? For me, the Masters of the Sea, Masters of Travel make the most sense. Pirates. They were the ones who had already sailed everywhere there was to sail. They had ventured to every corner of the planet. Guys, to me, for them to have designed a greater, more challenging adventure, once all the adventuring had been through, had been completed, because that just seemed like a fun thing to do, that makes sense. Simultaneously, they would be leaving the world with something left, worthwhile to find, a reason for the next generation of pirates to go out to sea. This all feels like something a Luffy or a Roger of the past would do, something they might even laugh about. And I'd also think that potentially many islands here were literally placed on the sea. We've seen recently Kaido's fruit is capable of moving islands. We've heard of continent pullers. What role did they have in the past? I wonder if continent pullers during the Void Century or shortly thereafter dragged islands into the Grand Line, setting up the obstacle course. Hopefully many of these islands being uninhabited. I also just want to point out that not every island in the Grand Line has crazy absurd weather. So I like to believe in my head that a lot of these islands were spared by the pirates from utter destruction. And they just tossed in a few more islands in here to spice it up. And hell guys, it may have even been deeper than this. We know that the Ancient Kingdom was friends with and protected the non-human tribes of the world. If their islands were easy to find and get to, the Celestial Dragons may have already enslaved them all, hundreds of years ago. Maybe the Grand Line, difficult to sail and dangerous, protects people. I like to think of it like Wano Kuni. In the past, Wano was clearly an island with strong connections to the ancient kingdom. The Kozuki made the poneglyphs. Long ago, the Kozuki decided to close Wano's borders. They chose that because they thought it was necessary to do, and only now is it time to reopen. The Grand Line has effectively closed many countries' borders, if not as extreme as Wano. Wano is very protected. The same concept applies. Maybe Oda is foreshadowing this idea for people, pirates, who value freedom. They intentionally chose to restrict it for others' well-being, them to play because why the hell not? That's Roger's energy, and you all. Oda, man, Oda is a troll, and he'll take something serious, something mysterious, and then twist it in a way that'll make us laugh. That's a constant. I think that this might do that. But I also want to throw out there that the Grand Line might be a prison, a cage for pirates themselves. It's difficult to talk about in a short amount of time, but it's like, who is the real villain of One Piece? Is it the world government? Is it the Marines? Or is it other pirates? Pirates like Kaido, pirates like Big Mom, pirates like Blackbeard. In reality, the Grand Line draws all of these people to the sea to go become pirates, and then it kills them. And those that survive are seemingly trapped in the New World, obsessed with that last bit of treasure that they can never find. It almost acts as a cage for those kinds of pirates who want only power, because the only ones that can solve the puzzle are pirates like Luffy, who appreciate the adventure, not just for what lies at the end. Recently in the story, Oda has introduced the Rocks Pirates, the most powerful pirate crew of 40 or 50 years ago. And this is the interesting part here. In order to defeat Rocks, there was a team-up between pirates and Marines, Garp and Roger. Ultimately, I think that you have to believe that, or the Marines, because we are not led to believe that he fought either of those factions with the intent to destroy them. But I think that it is implied that Roger chased Rocks' D's back. I severely doubt that he just happened upon God Valley the moment. Shanks constantly worried about other pirates, even going so far as to talk to the Gorosei and recommend them to take action. Shanks fears pirates more than the government. Maybe history has repeated itself, and something similar happened during the Void Century, where the fun-loving, adventurous pirates teamed up with the world government to fight against other pirates. One of the core concepts that Oda had in his mind before One Piece was even serialized in the initial versions was Peace Main pirates versus Morganeers, two distinct types of pirates, and the Peace Main pirates' objective is to steal and defeat the Morganeers. And so in the creation of the Grand Line, part of its concept existed to trap these kinds of pirates, because of the threat that they pose to the entire world. And they were lured by the idea of the thing that they want most: wealth, fame, and power. A treasure that exists which could allow somebody to obtain all three of these things. But yeah, that's the theory. Essentially, this is that big brain energy of the pirates and maybe the government of the past, where you accomplish so many things in one. The Grand Line was transformed using awakenings, and in this, the pirates created an obstacle course where they could hide their treasure, to be found by other pirates like themselves. Simultaneously, this may have protected groups that they wanted to protect, and trap pirates that they feared. In this, we have the answer, both the how and the why, of the creation of the Grand Line. But anyway, guys, that is pretty much all I had to say today. As always, I'm curious as to what you guys think. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video, subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.